In the early morning of June 2, 2020, in Nanchang City, Sichuan Province, China, a single mother living with her 8-year-old daughter, Gu Cuifang, was brutally murdered by her ex-lover, Jiang, right inside her own apartment. According to initial findings at the scene, the victim's cause of death was determined to be severe injuries directly affecting internal organs and blood vessels. The victim's body bore 56 wounds, covering her face, neck, chest, abdomen, back, and limbs. The injuries were so severe that the funeral home was unable to restore her body to its original state. Faced with such a horrifying scene, the public asked, what was the motive that drove the perpetrator to commit such a brutal act? You are following a true story. Join us as we uncover the dark secrets and shocking details you've never heard before. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to explore today's case. Around 6 a.m. on June 2, 2020, outside an apartment on the 16th floor of a residential complex in Nanchang, an 8-year-old girl, Ling Ling, stepped into the hallway in a state of panic. Her entire body was trembling, her tiny hands clenched tightly with fear. Timidly, she reached out and knocked on the neighbor's door, soft, hesitant knocks breaking the eerie silence. Within 5 minutes, the door slowly creaked open. Mrs. Wang, an elderly neighbor, stood frozen, her eyes widening in horror at the sight before her. Ling Ling stood there, wearing a thin nightgown, her small body stained with crimson marks. Her innocent eyes were filled with fear, and her lips trembled uncontrollably. In a weak, broken voice, she whispered, "Grandma, my mom, he hurt her." Immediately, Mrs. Wang called her daughter, and both of them rushed to Gu Cuifang's apartment. As the door opened, they froze in horror. The entire place was soaked in a deep red hue, and the overpowering metallic scent filled the air, making them dizzy and nearly collapse. Mrs. Wang immediately called the police. Within about 15 minutes, law enforcement arrived at the scene. After an initial examination, police quickly confirmed the victim's identity as Gu Cuifang, 33 years old, a single mother who lived with her 8-year-old daughter, Ling Ling. It was revealed that after her divorce, Gu Cuifang rented a small apartment and opened a nail salon in a local shopping mall to support herself. Upon hearing that her daughter had been brutally murdered, Mrs. Gu rushed to the crime scene. Overcome with grief, she collapsed, her entire body shaking as she sobbed in agony. "My poor daughter, why did she have to die so tragically? Her body was mutilated, even her ears are gone." Not far away, little Ling Ling sat curled up in a corner, her gaze empty, detached from reality. It wasn't until the afternoon, after being comforted by the police and relatives, that Ling Ling slowly calmed down. In a faint voice, she recounted the horrifying moment. It was him. He broke down the bedroom door. "Mom and I were sleeping. But who was this him that Ling Ling referred to? Why did he ruthlessly take the life of a single mother right before an innocent child's eyes?" The police immediately expanded their investigation, focusing on those close to the victim, especially individuals who had conflicts or potential motives for the crime. According to some neighbors, Gu Cuifang was a kind and pleasant person, but she was very private about her personal life, and few knew details about her relationships. No one could have imagined that this horrifying tragedy stemmed from a mistake in choosing the wrong person. Let's go back in time to 2018. When Gu Cuifang was a woman who had just stepped out of a failed marriage. With the desire to provide the best life for her child, Gu Cuifang decided to open a small nail salon in the Wangfujing shopping center. Although the shop was not large, thanks to its prime location in a bustling area, the business thrived, helping her gradually stabilize her life. On days when she didn't have school, Ling Ling often accompanied her mother to the shop. To ensure her daughter could study while staying close to her, Gu Cuifang prepared a small table for Ling Ling, where she could read books and do her homework while her mother worked. Gu Cuifang always tried to give Ling Ling a complete childhood, dedicating all her love and care to her. She thought that peaceful life would last forever, but her fate changed at the end of 2018 when she accidentally met a man at a gathering with friends. That man's name was Jiang. Even as a single mother, Gu Cuifang maintained her youthful and radiant beauty. She had a trendy fashion sense and took great care of herself, making it hard for others to guess her real age. At the 2018 gathering, Cuifang was immediately captivated by her beauty. Not missing the opportunity, he actively approached her, started a conversation, and asked for her phone number, marking the beginning of an intense pursuit. Every day, Cuifang appeared in front of her nail salon with a large bouquet of roses, patiently waiting for Cuifang to finish work. After work, Cuifang attentively picked her up, regardless of whether it was sunny or raining. He often took Cuifang out for dinner at luxurious restaurants with romantic atmospheres. When she got home, Cuifang immediately sent sweet messages, using affectionate words to make her feel like the most important person in the world. Perhaps because she had been alone for so long, Cuifang started to be moved by his attentiveness. Gradually, she fell in love with Cuifang, even though deep down, she soon noticed some warning signs. Cuifang had no stable job, relied on gambling, was always short on money, and frequently borrowed from others. Cuifang still convinced herself to continue the relationship, hoping that love could change a person. However, just a month later, a friend of Cuifang accidentally revealed a shocking truth. Cuifang was already married and even had 2 children. Stunned, Cuifang suddenly realized that she had unknowingly become the other woman, that all the promises of love she had believed in were just lies. She immediately cut off all ties and wanted nothing more to do with Cuifang. But Cuifang refused to accept it. He became obsessed, willing to do anything to keep her. He knelt down, begging desperately for forgiveness. He cried continuously, swearing he would divorce if only she gave him a chance. Cuifang was a gentle and kind-hearted woman. Just seeing a stray cat on the street made her feel pity. And this was the man she had once loved deeply. She had once dreamed of a happy family, believing that sincerity could change a person. And in the end, she chose to believe him once again. After a year of secrecy in July 2019, Cuifang officially divorced. He declared that love had conquered all, and that finally the 2 of them could be together openly. Cuifang naively believed that this was a new beginning, but she had no idea that this was only the start of a nightmare with no way out. From the very beginning, Cuifang's parents never supported this relationship. They saw through Cuifang's nature, an unstable man without ambition, always vague about his future. Cuifang's parents anxiously warned her, "A 30-year-old man who still doesn't have a stable job, do you think he will take care of you and your daughter in the future?" But Cuifang ignored everything and firmly responded, "As long as he loves me and loves my daughter, that's enough." She even told herself, "He divorced for me. Isn't that proof of his sincere love?" But it didn't take long for Cuifang to realize that Cuifang was indeed as unreliable as his parents had warned. Right after the divorce, Cuifang revealed his true nature. He didn't look for a job and spent his days hanging out with friends, indulging in a reckless lifestyle. Cuifang completely relied on Cuifang's money, enjoying it without any intention of becoming independent. He sank deeper into gambling, repeatedly borrowing money from Cuifang with promises to repay, but never fulfilling them. Cuifang paid off Cuifang's credit card debts multiple times, hoping to help him get his life back on track. At the same time, she tried to persuade him to find a job, not for the salary, but because she believed a man couldn't remain lazy and irresponsible forever. But despite his promises, Cuifang never changed. He kept losing himself in poker games, ignoring all of Cuifang's advice. It wasn't until a shocking incident that Cuifang finally decided to break up with Cuifang. That day, Cuifang once again asked Cuifang for money to gamble. She refused, unwilling to enable his addiction. But Cuifang never expected Cuifang to resort to violence. While she was distracted, he suddenly shoved her against the wall and forcefully snatched her wallet. Without hesitation, he searched through it and took all the money inside. That act completely shattered Cuifang's trust in Cuifang. She lost all hope in him and decided to cut ties. But how could Cuifang easily let go of the money source he had grown dependent on? No matter where Cuifang went, Cuifang followed, constantly harassing her with obsessive stalking. Not only did she suffer, but even her colleagues, friends, and neighbors were also disturbed by him. Cuifang became more and more terrifying. He knocked on Cuifang's door at midnight, tampered with the hallway lights, and broke into her shop to beg for money. He even followed her parents and daughter, secretly taking photos of them and sending them to Gu Cuifang as a threat. These obsessive actions pushed Gu Cuifang into a state of nervous breakdown. Desperate, she had no choice but to call the police for help. However, as soon as the police arrived, Cuifang immediately pretended to be a decent man, acting obedient and remorseful. Since there was no concrete evidence of criminal behavior, the police could only warn and advise him to stop. As soon as the police left, Cuifang resumed harassing Gu Cuifang. Once he shamelessly asked to borrow 20,000 yuan from her for gambling. Fed up with Cuifang's constant stalking and harassment, Gu Cuifang had no choice but to pay to avoid trouble. Hoping he would finally leave her alone, she transferred 20,000 yuan to Cuifang. He pretended to write an IOU, but she knew well that this money would never return. However, Gu Cuifang's patience didn't stop Cuifang. On the contrary, he became even more aggressive, like a shadow haunting her life. 2 days before the incident, from her apartment window, Gu Cuifang saw Cuifang wandering below the building, as if stalking her. Shortly after, a knock echoed from outside the security door. Gu Cuifang panicked, fearing that Cuifang might break in. With no other option, she quickly called the police for help. When the police arrived, they immediately arrested Cuifang, who was carrying a dagger. However, just as they were about to take him to the station, Gu Cuifang hesitated. Wanting to calm the situation, she proposed a settlement, only asking Cuifang to promise he would stop harassing her. Seeing that Cuifang admitted his mistakes with a good attitude and hadn't physically harmed anyone, the police decided to treat the case as a domestic dispute. They only gave him a verbal warning, educated him about his wrongful actions, and let him go. No one expected that just 2 days later, a tragedy would occur. Cuifang felt abandoned by Gu Cuifang, bitterly believing she didn't appreciate him. He had divorced for her, left his wife and child, drowned in debt from gambling, and was unable to repay his loans. In the end, he had nothing left. He blamed everything on Gu Cuifang, believing she was the one who ruined his life. And so, he decided to make her pay with her life. At 7 p.m. in 2020, Cuifang silently took a dagger and a kitchen knife, carefully hiding them under his clothes. Under the cover of darkness, Cuifang sneaked into the apartment complex where Gu Cuifang lived, his heart filled with hatred and murderous intent. Then, Cuifang silently hid on the rooftop of the building, patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Around 8 p.m., from the rooftop, he looked down and saw Gu Cuifang and her daughter just entering the apartment complex. At that moment, Gu Cuifang had no idea that a pair of eyes were silently watching her from above. As usual, she locked the security door and then carefully locked the inner door once more. According to Gu Cuifang's daughter's later testimony, around 9 p.m., as they were preparing for bed, they suddenly heard the sound of a lighter and footsteps. The little girl anxiously asked her mother, "Mom, is he inside?" Immediately, they checked all the rooms but found nothing unusual. After that, Gu Cuifang tightly shut the windows, locked the bedroom door, and even used a chair to barricade it for safety. At 5 a.m., Cuifang used a spare key he had prepared in advance to sneak into the house. But when he tried to open the bedroom door, he realized it was locked from the inside. Enraged, Cuifang kicked the door violently, breaking it open. The loud noise startled Gu Cuifang and her daughter awake at the same time. Seeing Cuifang burst into the room, Ling trembled and clutched her mother's hand, whispering, "Mom, he's inside." Gu Cuifang was shocked by Cuifang's actions and shouted angrily, "What are you doing? Get out!" But before she could finish speaking, Cuifang grabbed the kitchen knife and furiously lunged at her. He then pulled out a dagger and continued his frenzied attack, unleashing his madness on Gu Cuifang's body. Ling was paralyzed with fear, unable to move. But summoning all her courage, she trembled and screamed, "Don't hurt my mom!" Cuifang glared at the girl and coldly shouted, "Shut up!" Fear gripped Ling's throat, leaving her unable to utter another word. More than 10 minutes of horror passed before Cuifang finally stopped. He took Gu Cuifang's phone and calmly left the scene. By then, Gu Cuifang had collapsed in a pool of red, silent forever. After a few minutes, Ling finally dared to get out of bed, cautiously approaching her mother. She called her several times, but there was no response. The scene before her sent Ling Ling into panic, but she struggled to stay calm. Seeing her mother injured, she ran to the kitchen, grabbed a basin of cold water, and poured it over her mother's face, hoping she would wake up. But Cuifang did not move. The girl wanted to call the police, but her mother's phone had been taken by Zhang. With no other choice, Ling Ling gathered her courage, walked to the door, and peeked outside to make sure no one was in the hallway. Then, she cautiously knocked on the neighbor's door, where Mrs. Wang lived, begging for help. According to the forensic report, Gu Cuifang's body had 56 deep wounds scattered across her head, shoulders, back, arms, and legs. The tragedy was so devastating that Gu Cuifang's family hoped the funeral home could stitch her body before cremation. But the response they received was, "The wounds are too severe. It cannot be stitched together." At 1 p.m. on June 3, 2020, the police arrested Qu Jiang while he was hiding in Yueqi County, 70 kilometers from the crime scene. Faced with undeniable evidence, Qu Jiang finally confessed to his crime. Qu Jiang's family remained completely silent. No one stepped forward to take responsibility or apologize to Gu Cuifang's family. It was not until the day before the trial that Qu Jiang's younger sister met with Gu Cuifang's parents, offering 60,000 yuan in hopes that the Gu family would agree to a settlement and forgive his crime. Outraged by the Qu family's indifference and irresponsibility, Mrs. Gu angrily cried out, "Can 60,000 yuan buy my daughter's life?" In the end, Qu Jiang's sister was thrown out of the house by Mr. and Mrs. Gu. On December 30, 2020, the Nanchang Intermediate People's Court announced its first instance ruling. Qu Jiang was convicted of intentional homicide and public disorder. His death sentence was suspended for 2 years, and he was ordered to pay over 760,000 yuan in compensation to the victim's family. This verdict sparked public outrage, but no one was more devastated and angered than the Gu family. Although Qu Jiang was sentenced to death, the 2-year suspension was unacceptable to them, because if Qu Jiang committed no further intentional crimes during the 2-year suspension, his sentence would be reduced to life imprisonment. Moreover, if he demonstrated good behavior, his sentence could be further reduced to 25 years in prison. As a result, the Gu family immediately submitted a petition to the Nanchang People's Procuratorate demanding a harsher sentence for Qu Jiang. After reviewing the relevant factors, on January 13, 2021, the Nanchang People's Procuratorate officially filed an appeal with the Xinhai People's Court, requesting a reconsideration of the first instance ruling. On December 28, 2021, the Sichuan Supreme Court issued its final verdict. Qu Jiang was guilty of intentional homicide and was sentenced to immediate execution. Gu Cuifang's death plunged her family into endless grief and despair. Her elderly parents in particular were unable to bear the pain of losing their daughter. As for Ling Ling, she was only 8 years old, but had to witness her mother's brutal murder with her own eyes. That horrific moment left a deep scar on her young heart, a permanent wound that could never heal. Since the tragedy, Ling Ling has been unable to sleep without the lights on. She frequently has nightmares and panics at loud noises. She became withdrawn and quiet. Her academic performance declined drastically, and she even showed signs of depression. Gu Cuifang's tragic story serves as a warning that violence in relationships should never be tolerated. If you notice signs of danger, leave immediately. Tolerance does not change abusers, it only prolongs the tragedy. That concludes the video. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so we can bring you more emotional and strange stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.
On September 19, 2000, in a small village in Henan Province, China, 2 brutally murdered bodies were discovered, drawing media attention. This case marked the beginning of a terrifying killing spree lasting 4 years, claiming the lives of 67 unfortunate victims. The press gave the killer the nickname the Deranged Monster, a name synonymous with the fear and horror that gripped China at the time. None other than Yang Xinhai, a man diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, harboring extreme and twisted violent tendencies. The mystery surrounding him might have remained unsolved forever had he not made a critical mistake, inadvertently leaving traces at the crime scene, giving the police a crucial lead to track him down. Nhấn like and subscribe để cùng chúng tôi khám phá nó ngay sau đây. Every morning, Li Xinhai would visit her, but for the past 2 days, he had not shown up, causing Han Fangting great concern. Sensing something was wrong, she immediately asked a nearby neighbor, "I haven't seen Xinhai for 2 days. Do you know what happened?" The neighbor shook their head, looking visibly puzzled. No one had seen Li Xinhai in the past 2 days. Han Fangting then went to look for her 2 grandchildren, Li Yanli, 13 years old, and Li Yanyan, 9 years old. Strangely, neither of them had come to visit her as usual. Some neighbors gathered, whispering with worried expressions. One of them suddenly spoke up. His cows are still locked in the barn. Normally he lets them out early in the morning, but for the past 2 days they've been kept inside. Something is wrong. Those words made Han Fangting freeze, as a vague sense of fear rose in her heart. Without hesitation, she quickly walked along the dirt road, ignoring the curious glances of the neighbors, heading straight to Li Xinhai's house at the end of the village. When she arrived, she found the door locked, and the entire house was shrouded in an eerie silence. At first, she thought her son might have taken the 2 children on a trip for a change of scenery. But she immediately dismissed this thought. Her son had never left the village without informing her beforehand. Moreover, if the 3 of them had really gone somewhere, at least someone would have seen or heard about it. Han Fangting knocked on the door, but there was no response. Only the sound of cows mooing from the barn in the yard. A deep sense of unease surged through her. She immediately searched for the spare key in the yard, unlocked the gate, and stepped inside. Through the window, she was shocked to see her son, Li Xinhai, grandson Li Yanli, and granddaughter Li Yanyan lying motionless on the bed. They looked as if they were in a deep sleep. However, when Han leaned closer to get a better look into the room and called their names, a horrifying scene immediately unfolded before her eyes. Li Xinhai lay beside his son on the large bed, surrounded by a dark red stain. Their clothes were soaked, bearing the clear marks of the horrific event. Li Xinhai's face had suffered severe trauma, to the point where he was almost unrecognizable. His grandson, Li Yanli, met a similar fate. His small hands were still covered in dirt. At that moment, Han suddenly realized the heartbreaking truth. Her little grandson had likely tried to escape, struggling until his last breath. Before she could recover from the shock, she noticed that her granddaughter Li Yanyang's clothing was disheveled, with suspicious bruises visible on her body. All 3 victims had a small indentation on their foreheads, a sign that they had been struck with force by a sharp-edged object, most likely a hammer or a metal rod. In that moment, Han felt as if she had fallen into an abyss of despair, facing unimaginable pain, losing her son and 2 grandchildren in the blink of an eye. When the police arrived, she immediately pleaded for an explanation. Who had mercilessly taken the lives of her family? But the answer did not come immediately. It took 8 months for the case to gradually unfold, because Han was not alone in her grief. At the same time, a series of murders with similar methods were occurring across 4 provinces in eastern and central China. People called the killer the Hammer Madman, while the media labeled him as the Monster Killer. And the one behind this horrifying crime spree was none other than Yang Xinhai. To understand the root causes of Yang Xinhai's crimes, we need to turn back time and explore his past. Perhaps the hidden corners of his tragic life and extremist thoughts will slowly be revealed. Yang Xinhai was born on July 17, 1968, in a poor rural area of Zhengyan County, Henan Province, China. As the 4th son in a large family with many siblings, Yang Xinhai's childhood was marked by hardship and deprivation. People in the village where Yang Xinhai grew up remembered him as a well-behaved, honest, and hardworking boy who rarely caused trouble or mischief. However, behind his gentle appearance, Yang Xinhai was a withdrawn and introverted child, rarely expressing his thoughts. Interestingly, he also possessed a natural artistic talent. Years later, Yang Xinhai's father recounted to investigators that from a young age, he noticed his son had an extraordinary ability. Yang Xinhai could accurately recreate anything he saw in his drawings. However, Yang Xinhai always harbored deep insecurities about his family's poverty, believing it was the reason he could not pursue his artistic dreams, further fueling his sense of alienation from society. Thanks to his diligent studies, Yang Xinhai became the only one in his family who was able to attend high school, making him the family's greatest hope at the time. However, due to financial constraints, his family could no longer afford to support his education, leading to growing tensions between Yang Xinhai and his father. As he grew older, Yang Xinhai became increasingly aware of his disadvantages compared to his peers. Unable to afford tuition fees, he became desperate to find a job to support himself and escape poverty. Every weekend, Yang Xinhai would cut grass and herd cattle to earn extra money to send home. At school, Yang Xinhai's circumstances were even harsher. While his classmates could bring food from home to exchange for meal tickets, Yang Xinhai had to survive on wild vegetables or cook for himself. His poverty, combined with his thin and unattractive appearance, made him a frequent target of ridicule from his classmates. The constant feeling of being looked down upon, along with his growing insecurity, began to take a toll on his mental state. It was no surprise that Yang Xinhai's academic performance deteriorated significantly. By the end of high school, Yang Xinhai suddenly ran away from home. Yang Shangquan, Yang Xinhai's father, recalled that during that time, his son wrote a letter home, lamenting that he had no meal tickets. Feeling sorry for his son, he struggled to gather a sack of wheat and brought it to school to exchange for meal tickets. However, when he arrived, he was shocked to learn that Yang Xinhai had been absent for several days. A villager recalled, "At that time, Yang Xinhai's mother cried a lot. She searched everywhere for her son in vain." After ending his academic journey, Yang Xinhai had not yet been corrupted. According to police reports, at that time, Yang Xinhai was only 17 years old. He longed to leave his hometown in search of business opportunities, hoping for a better life. Initially, Yang Xinhai worked in a coal mine. Not long after, he followed a construction team to Taiyuan City, Shanxi Province, China, and was hired as their cook. During this period, Yang Xinhai continued writing letters home, reassuring his family that they did not need to worry about him. A significant event changed the course of Yang Xinhai's fate. The turning point came when he was cheated out of his wages by a restaurant that refused to pay him. In a fit of anger, Yang Xinhai decided to steal an aluminum tray to sell for money. For the first time committing theft, he suddenly realized that having money in his pocket was much easier than earning it through honest labor. After that, a series of unfortunate events followed, gradually distorting his psychology and humanity. From an introverted and kind-hearted farm boy, he gradually transformed into a deranged monster. Even Lu Hongshan, from the Criminal Police Division of the Shandong Provincial Public Security Bureau, stated that Yang Xinhai's case was so serious and complex that it should be included in forensic investigation textbooks. Unable to endure poverty, Yang Xinhai began to spiral into a life of theft. In 1988, he was sentenced to 2 years of forced labor reform in Xi'an, Shanxi Province, China. However, 3 years later, Yang Xinhai committed another theft. He was arrested and sentenced to 1 year in prison in Shijiazhuang, Hebei Province, China. That was also the last time Yang Shangquan ever saw his son. Before leaving his hometown for work, Yang Xinhai's girlfriend had promised to wait for him and marry him upon his return. Throughout their time apart, he firmly believed that his lover was still waiting for him. However, after being released from prison, Yang Xinhai bitterly realized that the woman who had promised to wait for him had become someone else's wife. Poverty, wage fraud, and the heartbreak of betrayal pushed Yang Xinhai to the brink of despair. Those accumulated traumas may have ignited the dark nature that was beginning to awaken within him. After this shock, Yang Xinhai abandoned his hometown, wandered from place to place, and never returned. In 1996, Yang Xinhai was sentenced to 5 years in prison for attempted sexual assault. However, he was released early in 2000. In this case, Yang Xinhai attempted to attack a woman but faced fierce resistance. Before he could escape, the victim managed to bite off a part of his tongue, causing him serious injury. According to police analysis, this might have been one of the reasons why Yang Xinhai developed a deep hatred toward women later on. This incident also contributed to his increasing brutality, making him lose control over his criminal impulses. At the age of 28, Yang Xinhai had already spent a total of 7 years in prison, progressively becoming psychologically more disturbed in a terrifying way. After being released from prison, he formed a group specializing in begging and robbery. However, after one failed attempt, he learned that acting alone would be safer. From then on, he began a solitary criminal path, continuously committing thefts, robberies, and attacks on victims. From 2000 to 2003, Yang Xinhai alone committed 26 major crimes. Among them, he murdered 67 people, injured 10 others, and attacked or assaulted 23 additional victims across 4 provinces: Henan, Shandong, Anhui, and Hebei. Yang Xinhai committed his first murder on September 19, 2000, in Cuifang village, Beijiao town, Chuanwei district, Zhoukou city, Henan province. Less than 2 weeks later, on October 1, 2000, another horrific crime occurred in Tongshou village, Shaoying town, Yingzhou district, Fuyang city, Anhui province, where 3 victims were found murdered in their own home. The victims included Wu Shenying, a 62-year-old elderly woman, and her 2 grandchildren, Zhan Yadao, 7 years old, and Zhan Yateng, 12 years old. The victims were attacked with a hammer and a knife, with evidence indicating that the crime was both intentional and gruesome. Zhan Yateng, the 12-year-old girl, was found without clothing, showing signs of injury before being murdered. This case shocked the public for a long time due to the exceptionally cruel and inhumane manner in which it was carried out. Even after the case was solved, the local residents remained in shock. They could not understand how a thin and frail-looking man like Yang Xinhai could overpower an elderly woman who was still very strong, even more robust than many sturdy men in the village. Since 2000, a series of horrifying murders had continuously occurred in Henan and Anhui. In most cases, the murder weapon found at the crime scenes was a hammer with an octagonal head and a wooden handle. Police later revealed that Yang Xinhai frequently traveled by bicycle, using the opportunity to commit thefts along the way while waiting for the right moment to sneak into homes. Among the string of murders, the most horrifying took place on August 15, 2001, in Fangsha village, Linying County, Lui City, Henan Province. There, Qi Xian, 42 years old, and her 2 children, Liu Feifei, 14 years old, and Liu Zhidong, 11 years old, were all murdered inside their home. The murder weapon was confirmed to be a hammer, and Liu Feifei showed signs of assault before being killed. While police in Henan and Anhui were working tirelessly to investigate and search for clues, the killer quickly moved to another region to continue his crimes. On August 15, 2003, a horrifying crime occurred in Lidao village, Juchun town, Xinhai county, Hebei province, where a young married couple and a 15-year-old girl were murdered inside their home. Just 3 days later, on August 18, a similar case occurred in Hebei province. This time, the victims were a family of 5 in Liangshuang village, Jiaoxi district, Shijiazhuang city. All were attacked with a knife and hammer while sleeping, leaving them no chance to resist. The crime scene bore many similarities to previous cases in Henan and Shandong provinces. This led the police to suspect that the perpetrator was continuing his brutal crime spree across multiple regions. Committing 2 murders within 3 days was unprecedented in Yang Xinhai's criminal history. He continuously carried out crimes in different provinces using the same method, creating a major challenge for Chinese authorities. Through crime scene investigations, combined with the testimony of a few surviving witnesses, the investigation agency narrowed down the suspect and determined that the perpetrator likely came from Henan province. Around midnight on November 3, 2003, The Criminal Investigation Team of the Xinhua Police Bureau in Kangzhou City, Hebei Province, spotted a suspicious individual outside room 205 of the Gongxiao Hotel in Kangzhou. As the officers continued to follow him, the suspect moved towards the railway tracks, an area deserted at that hour. Realizing he was being watched, he immediately sped up and tried to escape. Two detectives pursued him for nearly 200 meters and quickly closed in on him. When cornered, he pulled out a knife and fought back fiercely. However, thanks to their experience and combat skills, the two detectives quickly subdued him, restrained his hands, and disarmed him. Shortly after, the suspect was taken to the Kangzhou City Police headquarters for interrogation. On November 5, 2003, DNA test results from the Hebei Provincial Public Security Bureau confirmed that Yang Xinhai's samples matched the hair samples collected at multiple crime scenes. This confirmed that he was the highly dangerous individual being intensely pursued by the Chinese Ministry of Public Security. According to Professor Li Maijin from the Chinese People's Public Security University, Yang Xinhai had lost all emotion for a long time, making him numb and indifferent to human life. Yang Xinhai meticulously planned his crimes to leave no trace, including footprints and any biological evidence. After attacking his victims, he ensured no traces were left on their bodies. Instead, he used a cloth to wipe away all evidence and then took the biological evidence with him to dispose of it. These two characteristics indicated that he was a highly calculated criminal, fitting the profile of a dangerous and premeditated offender. Later, medical tests confirmed that Yang Xinhai was HIV positive. On February 1, 2004, Yang Xinhai was convicted of murdering 67 people and sexually assaulting 23 victims, and was sentenced to death by the People's Court of Luohe City, Henan Province. At the time of sentencing, Chinese media reported that he was one of the most notorious serial killers in the country's history. Yang Xinhai was executed by firing squad on February 14, 2004. The case's closure received widespread public approval. Many believed the punishment was entirely justified. The victims' families expressed their grief, but felt some solace knowing that justice had been served. Thank you for following this story. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more chilling and mysterious crime cases. Remember, no matter how terrifying the truth is, it must be told, so that justice is always upheld. A flight from New York to Seoul was expected to last 14 hours. However, just as the plane started taxiing, an unexpected and unprecedented incident occurred. The plane, carrying over 250 passengers, was forced to turn back to the gate just because one individual was dissatisfied with a bag of macadamia nuts. The crew was confused, and the passengers were bewildered, not understanding what was happening. It sounds unbelievable, but this is exactly what happened on a Korean Air flight in 2014, sparking the infamous nut rage scandal. More than just an outrageous event, it exposed the true face of South Korea's chaebol elite, a world where power can bend even the strictest aviation safety rules. What secrets lie behind this seemingly absurd incident? How could one individual abuse their power to the extent of forcing an international flight to turn around just because of a snack? Like and subscribe to join us in uncovering this shocking story. The main character of today's story is Cho Hyun-ah, also known as Heather Cho. She was born on October 5, 1974, in Seoul, South Korea. She is the eldest daughter of Cho Hyun-ah, the former chairman of the Hanjin Group and CEO of Korean Air, South Korea's leading airline. He was also one of the founding members of SkyTeam, one of the largest airline alliances in the world. Heather Cho had an impeccable background. She graduated from Cornell University in the US with a degree in hotel management. Before that, she attended the University of Southern California. Despite having a passion for the arts from a young age, she chose to follow the business path to inherit her family's empire. Heather Cho was once considered a successful businesswoman, but everything changed completely on December 5, 2014. A seemingly trivial incident ruined her career and shocked the entire world. At 1 a.m. on December 5, 2014, Korean Air Flight 86 was preparing for departure from JFK Airport, New York, en route to Incheon, South Korea. Heather Cho was seated in first class. As the plane prepared for takeoff, flight attendant Kim Do-hee brought her a bag of macadamia nuts as part of the in-flight service. A seemingly ordinary action, but it immediately triggered the explosive rage of the airline executive. Heather Cho threw the bag of nuts at the flight attendant. Her voice was cold, her eyes sharp. "Do you know where I am sitting? This is first class. Why are you serving macadamia nuts in a bag instead of on a plate?" Faced with Heather Cho's fury, flight attendant Kim Do-hee trembled as she explained that she was simply following Korean Air's regulations. Macadamia nuts must be served in a sealed bag to prevent allergy risks. But this response did not calm Heather Cho's anger. On the contrary, it made her even more furious. Heather Cho shouted, "I am the vice president of Korean Air. Do you think I don't know the company's regulations? I understand them better than anyone. Get the manager here now." Chief Purser Park Chang-jin realized the situation was escalating and immediately approached with the service manual, hoping to clarify the service procedure and de-escalate the situation. However, the moment he opened his mouth, Heather Cho cut him off immediately. Heather Cho ordered, "Not you. I want Kim Do-hee to bring the manual here herself. I want her to turn every single page so I can personally point out her disgraceful amateur mistake." Kim Do-hee was embarrassed and humiliated, but due to the power dynamics, she had no choice but to comply. Heather Cho continued to point her finger at Kim Do-hee's face, aggressively pushing her shoulder. Her tone was arrogant, filled with contempt. "You are not qualified to work in first class. I will make sure you never serve on another flight again." Another flight attendant rushed to assist, pointing directly at the section in the manual. "Madam Vice President, according to the airline's food safety policy, macadamia nuts must be served in a sealed bag to prevent allergy risks." But this undeniable evidence only added fuel to the fire. Heather Cho shouted, "This rule does not apply to me. I am sitting in first class and I demand proper service. Do you even know who you are working for?" Shifting the blame from the flight attendant, Heather Cho turned her attack toward Chief Purser Park Chang-jin. She pointed at him, her voice sharp. "As the chief purser, why didn't you explain this rule from the beginning? This is your fault. Everything that happened today is on you." The situation escalated further. Heather Cho ordered Park Chang-jin to kneel and apologize immediately. The entire first-class cabin fell silent. The flight attendants exchanged anxious glances. No one dared to intervene. They knew all too well that defying the Cho family meant one thing: getting fired. Heather Cho's rage reached its peak. Without waiting for Park Chung-jin to respond, she grabbed the service manual and slammed it onto his shoulder. But that wasn't the worst part. Heather Cho issued one final command, a demand that crossed all limits. She ordered the pilot to turn the plane back to JFK Airport and remove Chief Purser Park Chang-jin from the flight. Park Chang-jin was stunned. "Madam Vice President, the plane is already taxiing on the runway. We cannot turn back. This is a safety regulation." But Heather Cho completely ignored him. She screamed, "Call the captain right now. I don't care. I order you to turn this plane around." Amidst the chaos in the cabin, the pilot received an emergency request from first class. The plane must return to the gate immediately. This was a direct order from the Vice President of Korean Air. The pilot knew this action could violate aviation regulations, but the pressure from Heather Cho was overwhelming. This was a woman who had the power to control the entire airline. How could he refuse? The captain contacted JFK Airport Air Traffic Control, informing them that the plane would return to the gate. The given reason? A customer service incident. The plane slowly turned around. Passengers were confused, flight attendants were terrified, but no one dared to speak up. After all, the name Heather Cho held immense power at that time. Chief Purser Park Chang-jin was forced to leave the plane. He lowered his head as he stepped out, carrying an overwhelming sense of humiliation. A man who had dedicated his entire career to aviation was now being thrown off a flight over a bag of macadamia nuts. After a 20-minute delay, the plane finally took off. But no one could forget what had just happened. In Heather Cho's eyes, the matter was over. She leaned back comfortably in her first-class seat, sipping her expensive glass of wine as if nothing had ever happened. But she had no idea that a media storm was about to hit her. The Cho family was known to be above the law. They not only controlled Korean Air, but also held huge stakes in various industries, from aviation to maritime transport. Had the incident not been leaked, she could have easily buried it, just like countless other family scandals. But this time, public outrage spiraled beyond control. A passenger on the flight exposed the entire truth. South Korean newspapers immediately published reports on the scandal. Social media exploded. The hashtag #nutrage became the hottest trending topic on Twitter and Naver, with millions of people enraged by Heather Cho's blatant abuse of power. But this sudden attention inadvertently dragged Park Chang-jin into a whirlwind of corporate retaliation. As soon as he landed in South Korea, he was summoned to a private meeting with Korean Air's top management. He was pressured to write an apology letter, admitting that he mishandled the situation and voluntarily left the plane for the benefit of the flight. Park Chang-jin refused. He knew he had done nothing wrong, but his silence could earn him a hefty compensation payout. Korean Air offered him a large sum of money to keep quiet about the incident. But would he accept it? The answer was no. Park Chung-jin refused to sign the apology letter. He decided to expose the truth. And just one day after the meeting, Park Chung-jin was fired. Korean Air terminated his contract, citing violation of customer service standards. Park Chung-jin had nothing left to lose. He was going to stand up and reveal the entire truth about the Nutrage scandal. Since the incident violated aviation regulations, the police were forced to investigate. But when the official probe began, Heather Cho refused to admit any wrongdoing. Heather Cho claimed that Park Chung-jin failed to properly explain service regulations in the manual. According to her, his lack of professionalism forced her to correct the in-flight service procedure. But she didn't stop there. Heather Cho spread a shocking rumor, insinuating that Park Chung-jin had an inappropriate relationship with flight attendant Kim Do-hee. This rumor not only tarnished Park Chung-jin's reputation, but also diverted the investigation, turning the victim into the accused. He had already lost his job, but now they wanted to destroy his personal dignity as well. He realized he could no longer stay silent. If he did nothing, his entire life would be ruined forever. Park Chung-jin faced two choices: one, stay silent and wait for the results of the investigation by the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, and Transport of South Korea. 2, look for a new job. But who would dare hire him now? Instead, he chose a third path, one that few would dare to take. He decided to bring the truth to light. He reached out to the press, an unprecedented move. A former chief purser, once employed by a powerful chaebol airline, now dared to stand up against the very system that had swallowed his life whole. His story was published in the media. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. The South Korean public was outraged. They had long been accustomed to chaebol abuse, but this was the first time a victim had the courage to expose the truth. The hashtag #nutrage became a symbol of the fight against chaebol abuse. The public began digging into past scandals of the Cho family, fueling an even greater wave of fury. Heather Cho's behavior was labeled as gapjil. This term refers to arrogant, power-abusing individuals who mistreat subordinates and exploit their authority. Gapjil, a stain on South Korean society. It was not just an individual act of misconduct, but a reflection of a deep-rooted privilege system that had existed for centuries. A system that allowed the wealthy to trample on the powerless without consequences. The controversy wasn't limited to South Korea anymore. International media picked up the story. Major news outlets like CNN, BBC, and The Guardian began reporting on the shocking scandal of Korean Air's heiress. At first, Heather Cho denied all accusations. She told the press, "These are false allegations, twisted facts, and a deliberate attack to bring me down." But the media wasn't so easily deceived. Journalists immediately sought out other witnesses on the flight, including the only first-class passenger, to verify the incident. All witnesses confirmed Park Chang-jin's account. They described in detail how Heather Cho threw the bag of macadamia nuts at the flight attendant, insulted, and physically assaulted the staff. Meanwhile, Korean Air attempted to silence the witnesses. Some passengers revealed that they were offered gifts from the airline, including model planes and calendars, along with a request not to speak to the press. This act of bribery further enraged the public. Not only was it an absurd attempt at cover-up, but it also highlighted the blatant abuse of power by Heather Cho and Korean Air. Under immense public pressure, Korean Air issued an official apology to the passengers on the flight. However, their statement claimed that this was merely part of Heather Cho's service and safety inspection duties. This pathetic excuse was met with fierce backlash. The public not only rejected it outright, but also saw it as an insult to their intelligence. The media continued to dig deeper, uncovering a similar scandal from 2013, when Heather Cho had previously assaulted a flight attendant, simply because they had prepared her instant noodles incorrectly. Heather Cho's abuse of power wasn't an isolated incident. For years, she had acted like a queen, brazenly exploiting her authority. When approached by the media, Heather Cho feigned ignorance. She coldly stated, "I don't remember what happened. Perhaps people are misunderstanding me." But the public knew the truth. This was just another pathetic attempt at a cover-up. They demanded a public trial and real justice. As investigators began gathering evidence, summoning witnesses, and requesting internal data from Korean Air regarding the incident, they uncovered a shocking fact. A Korean Air executive had ordered staff to delete all records related to the macadamia nut incident on December 9, 2014. This was a serious criminal offense. The deletion of these records could be classified as obstruction of justice and destruction of evidence. On December 12, 2014, Cho Hyun-ah, the chairman of Hanjin Group and Heather Cho's father, appeared before the media. He bowed before the nation and issued a public apology. "I deeply regret what has happened. My daughter has made a serious mistake, and I will ensure that she takes responsibility." But this belated apology did nothing to calm the public's fury. They demanded real consequences, not just empty words. Cho Hyun-ah announced that Heather Cho would be removed from all her executive positions within the company. But people weren't convinced. Will she really be punished, or is this just a move to quiet the outrage? Shockingly, within a short period of time, Heather Cho returned to hold key positions at Korean Air, KL Hotel Network, and Hanjin Tour. The South Korean public realized that even when officially removed from the company, the Cho family's influence ensured that she still held power from behind the scenes. But this time, justice wouldn't let her walk free. On December 31, 2014, the South Korean prosecutor's office officially issued an arrest warrant for Heather Cho for violating aviation safety laws. For the first time, a chaebol heiress was actually arrested before the entire nation. On February 12, 2015, the Seoul Western District Court delivered its verdict. Heather Cho was sentenced to 1 year in prison for endangering aviation safety. This was a serious crime, punishable by up to 10 years in prison, but the story wasn't over yet. Less than 4 months later, on May 22, 2015, the Seoul High Court suddenly declared that Heather Cho was not guilty of altering the flight route. Her sentence was drastically reduced. The court ruled that her punishment be reduced to a 10-month suspended sentence for 2 years. After serving only 5 months in prison, Heather Cho was immediately released. Moreover, she faced no additional penalties for her suspended sentence. She returned home as if nothing had ever happened. After being released, Heather Cho began appearing at charity events, attempting to rehabilitate her public image. She participated in volunteer programs at orphanages, reading books to children, patiently caring for them, and offering assistance. Her gentle, compassionate image was splashed across newspapers, with South Korean media heavily reporting on her repentance. But was this truly a change of heart? The public remained skeptical. Could a woman who once forced a plane to turn around over macadamia nuts really feel remorse? The answer was revealed in April 2018. Heather Cho's own husband, Dr. Chung Jae-sun, publicly exposed shocking evidence about her true nature. What seemed like a perfect marriage, spanning from 2010 and producing twin sons in 2013, was merely a facade hiding a horrific family tragedy. Her husband filed for divorce, fought for custody of their children, and revealed that he had endured domestic abuse for 3 years. Not only her husband, even their innocent children were victims of Heather Cho's abuse. The public was left in shock. A woman infamous for her in-flight scandal was now involved in a domestic violence case? Dr. Chung Jae-sun provided evidence to KBS News, secretly recorded video footage that revealed the terrifying truth. In one video, Heather Cho screams at her husband, "Get out of this world," before violently throwing an iPad at him. And it didn't stop there. In another video, she viciously scolded her children simply because they ate candy before dinner. So the woman who pretended to be kind and gentle at charity events was actually a violent abuser in her own home. But Heather Cho didn't stay silent. She fought back. In an interview, she claimed, "My husband is an alcoholic with memory problems, and he is fabricating this lawsuit to steal the Cho family fortune." Both sides continued to present evidence against each other. But this time, the public knew exactly who the real victim was, and who the real abuser was. The custody battle between Heather Cho and her ex-husband, Dr. Chung Jae-sun, lasted nearly 5 years, becoming one of South Korea's most talked-about legal battles. In May 2022, the case finally reached its conclusion. The Seoul Family Court ruled that Dr. Chung Jae-sun would receive full custody of their twin sons, while Heather Cho would only be allowed to visit them twice a month and on holidays. The court's decision to strip Heather Cho of custody was seen as a harsh blow, confirming the severity of the abuse allegations. But what about Park Chang-jin, the man who dared to stand up against the powerful Cho family? What happened to him? In 2015, he won his lawsuit. The Seoul Western District Court ordered Korean Air to pay him 50 million won in compensation for his emotional and physical suffering. But this victory came at a terrible price. After taking an 18-month leave of absence for psychological treatment, Park Chang-jin returned to Korean Air, only to be demoted to economy class. From chief purser of first class, he was now forced to do menial tasks like cleaning the airplane restrooms, a silent act of retaliation from Korean Air. This was clearly a warning to anyone who dared to challenge cable power. The oppression continued. He was ostracized by colleagues, surrounded by false rumors, and suffered from severe psychological distress, forcing him to take another leave of absence for treatment. In 2018, he sued Korean Air again. But this time, the court only ordered the airline to compensate him $18,000 without overturning his demotion. Had even the legal system failed to challenge chaebol power? After years of failed battles, in 2020, Park Chang-jin finally left Korean Air. But he did not give up. He entered politics, determined to fight for workers' rights. Park Chang-jin's story raises a painful question about corporate culture and the unchecked power of chaebols in South Korea. What do you think about this scandal? Was justice truly served? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. That's the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to follow more gripping stories. Thank you for watching.